تنطلق الآن الجلسة الأولى للمؤتمر، والكلمة الآن لمدير الجلسة المهندس عبد الله الردادي المشرف العام على المشروع الوطني لأمن وحماية المطارات.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أصحاب السمو، أصحاب المعالي، أصحاب السعادة، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي ويسعدني نيابة عن اللجنة المنظمة للمؤتمر الدولي لأمن المطارات أن أجدد الترحيب بكم في مستهل الجلسة العلمية الأولى لهذا المؤتمر، والتي سيتكون جزءها الأول من محاضرتين تصفان تجربتين رائدتين في مجال أمن الطيران المدني. التجربة الأولى ستكون من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، أما التجربة الثانية فهي من أرض الحرمين ومعقل الأمن والأمان من المملكة العربية السعودية. ستكون مدة المحاضرة أيها الإخوة حوالي 20 دقيقة، وسوف يعطى في نهاية كل محاضرة 5 دقائق للأسئلة. نرجو أن تكون الأسئلة مختصرة لاستثمار الوقت بصورة جيدة. متحدثنا الأول أيها الحفل الكريم هو المتحدث الرئيسي لهذا المؤتمر، السيد جون بيستول، مدير إدارة أمن النقل بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، المعروف اختصاراً باسم TSA. ويسرني في عجالة تقديم نبذة مختصرة عن السيد بيستول فيما يلي. عين السيد جون بيستول في عام 2010 ليصبح المدير الخامس لإدارة TSA بعد خدمة دامت 26 عاماً في إدارة FBI. تدرج خلال هذه المدة في عدة مناصب، وقد اكتسب خبرة واسعة في مجال الأمن القومي ومكافحة الإرهاب ومكافحة الجريمة المنظمة. بعد الأحداث المؤلمة التي وقعت في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في سبتمبر من العام 2001، عين السيد بيستول رئيساً لبرنامج FBI الموسع لمكافحة الإرهاب، ثم مساعداً تنفيذياً وصولاً إلى منصب نائب الرئيس لتلك الإدارة. وقد رأس خلال فترة عمله أو شارك في عدد من الفرق رفيعة المستوى التي شكلت للتحقيق في بعض الحوادث الإرهابية. من هذه الحوادث حادث تفجير سيارة مفخخة في ميدان تايمز سكوير بنيويورك في العام 2010، حادث محاولة تفجير طائرة نورث ويست الرحلة رقم 253، محاولة الهجوم على محطة قطار الأنفاق في نيويورك في العام 2009، أيضاً محاولة استهداف طائرة في أجواء المملكة المتحدة عن طريق المتفجرات السائلة. كذلك شارك في التحقيق في حادث التفجير الانتحاري الغاشم الذي وقع في مجمع سكني بمدينة الرياض في العام 2003، والذي ذهب ضحيته عدد من الأشخاص من الجنسية الأمريكية. كما أن السيد بيستول حائز على العديد من الجوائز والأوسمة التقديرية. أدعو الآن السيد جون بيستول لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and good morning and welcome, everyone. I would like to extend my greetings to His Highness Prince Fahd bin Abdullah and to His Excellency Dr. Sugair and to the entire staff of the General Authority of Civil Aviation here in the Kingdom for hosting this conference on international aviation security and for bringing those people together who have an interest in international aviation security, along with the splendid vendors out here that we have seen. I'd like to spend a few moments this morning talking about three topics. One is to briefly describe what we in the United States see as the current threat environment in terms of civil aviation in particular. TSA has responsibility not only for aviation, but also for surface transportation in the United States, which involves trains and subways and buses and things like that. But my comments this morning will be focused on civil aviation in particular. The second topic then will be how we are dealing with these evolving threats in the U.S. that have obviously international ramifications, and how we are changing the one-size-fits-all approach that was stood up and created when TSA was created after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. And then the final part of my talk will be on the future of aviation security, particularly as it relates to our international partners, whether here in the Kingdom or throughout the world as it relates to both passenger and cargo security. So starting off, the context that these meetings are in and the context for which we deal with aviation security is that we are facing an enemy who is determined to have a successful attack against a commercial aircraft either within the United States or inbound to the United States. So since the terrorist attacks of 9/11, we have seen a number of attempts to bring down a passenger airliner or two cargo airliners that are bound for the U.S. Even though we provide security in the U.S. at 450 airports, and we have a number of layers of security in place there, the current intelligence tells us that the threats are more likely coming from overseas. And so, for example, just looking at the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, in December of 2001, obviously coming from Paris and going to Miami, but diverted to Boston. So we have that, and then we have the liquids plot coming from the United Kingdom with as many as 8 to 10 different U.S.-bound airliners that would be targeted with liquid explosives. And then we move forward to Christmas Day 2009, obviously with the 24-year-old Nigerian Abdul Muttalib, who was trained south of here in Yemen, of course, by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and who then got on that U.S.-bound airliner from Amsterdam and was fortunately not successful, but came very close to blowing himself and that aircraft up, that Northwest 253. In fact, what I'd like to do now is just show a brief video, which is a FBI recreation of that small device. So if you have a water bottle in front of you, or see one, that device that Abdul Muttalib used on that day is actually smaller than that water bottle. And so the challenge for us becomes, how do we detect that type of device that has no metal in it and could go through a walk-through metal detector hundreds or thousands of times and never set off an alarm? So that's why we in the U.S. have invested over 850 advanced imaging technology machines. These are the body scanners that detect both metal and non-metal items. And so as you see this video, you can see the explosive power of a very small device that has no metal. Thank you. So this is a small device, less than the size of that water bottle. And the challenge for us becomes then, we know particularly Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, particularly out of Yemen, is focused on getting this type of device on a plane bound for the U.S. So we saw that on Christmas Day 2009. And then just a year ago, in May of 2012, we saw another attempt that used a new, improved version, if you will, from a terrorist standpoint, of this same type of device. It had been improved from a terrorist standpoint in that it had 2 initiators instead of 1, and so one was a backup. It also used a new type of explosive that none of our explosive detection equipment or our bomb-sniffing canines had either been calibrated for the equipment or trained for the bomb-sniffing dogs. So it was a new type of explosive, and the challenge then became and becomes, how can we best screen for and find that type of explosive? Now, as you know, it was because of some outstanding work done by a number of different agencies that that bomb, who was given to a terrorist to get on a plane bound for the U.S., and his instructions were, wait till you get over the United States and then blow yourself up, similar to the Christmas Day plot. How can we best detect that? The best way for us is through intelligence. So in that instance, we had very good intelligence, obviously, about what was going on, and as it turned out, that terrorist was actually a double agent for a foreign security service who not only was able to get out of Yemen himself, but was able to take that device and give it to another security service, which then gave it to the FBI, brought it back to the FBI laboratory outside of Washington, D.C., where all the forensics were done on that, which I described, having the 2 initiators, having that new type of explosive, but again, being all non-metal and as an improvised explosive device. We then looked at another challenge that we have, not in regard to passenger aircraft, but as it relates to cargo aircraft. And that again came out of Yemen in October of 2010, when this same bomb maker who made that device and made the Christmas Day device and made this device last year at this time, made the 2 devices that were put in the toner cartridges of computer printers and then were shipped from Sana'a, Yemen they were bound for Chicago. But again, because of outstanding intelligence, and this really goes to His Highness Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, who provided the information through the Saudi Security Service, Mabahith, to the U.S. We then passed that down to our counterparts, where those devices were located in the United Arab Emirates and in the United Kingdom. We gave that information, the tracking numbers for those 2 devices, to our counterparts. They went out and found those boxes, those parcels with those devices in them, and on the first inspection did not find an explosive device. They said, no, there's nothing there. And we said, yes, we believe there is. This is outstanding intelligence. And so they went back, and on the second time, one of the authorities found it. It took a third time before the other authority actually found this device. So the point of all this is that we are facing a very determined enemy who is innovative in their design and their construction and their concealment of non-metallic improvised explosive devices. And as we know, the same bomb maker is responsible for the assassination attempt against Prince Mohammed bin Nayef several years ago. And so it's not just toward Western aviation or aircraft, it's also challenges and threats to the kingdom. And so that's the type of a threat that we're dealing with. Now, there are a number of other types of threats involving surface transportation, whether it's subways, trains, buses around the world, and all those are things that we work with our counterparts to try to address. But for the U.S., the Transportation Security Administration, the vast majority of our time, effort, and resources is dedicated to the aviation realm. So with that as a backdrop for the current threats, what we have been doing in TSA for the last 2.5 years is try to recognize that very few people have bad intent on an aircraft. They simply want to get from point A to point B safely, and in the U.S., that occurs over 27,000 times a day. So we have that many flights every day that take off and land within the U.S. We recognize that the vast majority, if not everybody, is not a terrorist, and they want to get from there to their destination safely. And so what we've been working on is what we call risk-based security, risk-based intelligence-driven. I mentioned that intelligence is our best tool, our best asset that we have in the fight against terrorists trying to blow up aircraft. And that's why we focus on that. We have start off every day with a classified intelligence briefing to say, here's what foreign security services, intelligence services, law enforcement are collecting around the world as to what terrorists may be thinking about, how they may be thinking, what research they're doing on the internet, and as we saw in the Boston Marathon bombings last month, how they are taking information about how to make an explosive device and using that and using commonly available materials to prepare improvised explosive devices with tragic results. So as we look at risk-based security, it's the idea that if we can differentiate between people because we know them and trust them in some regard, then we can expedite their physical screening because we have done some pre-screening of them. You heard in the introduction that I was an FBI agent for over 26 years, so I always traveled armed when I flew commercially. And so I didn't go through physical screening because I was known and trusted. I would go to the ticket counter, I would show my credentials, my FBI credentials, they'd give me a form to fill out, I'd fill it out, and then I'd take it to the exit lane, show a law enforcement officer there who would look at my credentials and the form, and I would sign a log book, and then I would get on the plane armed. So the notion that we can differentiate between people is not a new one. It's something that's been going on for years. The question is, how can we best do that? And in the United States, we're very fortunate because we have some basic information about all passengers, name, date of birth, and gender, but then a number of people are willing to share additional information with us through a known and trusted traveler program, or we already know a lot about them because they are a government employee with a security clearance, or they're a member of our armed forces, the military, or other categories. So what we started 2.5 years ago is to look at those individuals who would fit a low-risk category and try to differentiate between them and those that are high risk on a terrorist watch list, or who are in that area someplace in between, but we can make some judgments about them at the checkpoint, or again, if they volunteer information. And so what risk-based security means is that differentiation helps us to expedite the physical screening of those passengers we know and have some confidence in that they're not terrorists. So what we have established actually 14 different changes since we started this. And for example, if you are 75 years or older or 12 years or younger, then we allow you to go through an expedited physical screening simply because we know from all the intelligence gathered around terrorist attacks around the world that is very unlikely, not impossible, but very unlikely that you are a terrorist. Now we know that some terrorists and clearly drug smugglers use the elderly, particularly young children, as drug couriers from time to time. And that's a bad thing, but that's something that we have to be mindful of. So they still go through some physical screening, but it's not as invasive as it might be for somebody else. And clearly, if there's any alarms, any concerns, then it is a thorough physical screening. So we have those two age categories. Now, I mentioned members of the armed services, the military. We have worked with our Department of Defense to facilitate expedited physical screening for them. We're doing that in 9 airports now in the U.S., but that will be expanded to all 450 airports later this summer. So that's another way of saying, okay, we have some confidence that you are not a terrorist, you are fighting for our freedoms, so let's reciprocate here and move forward in that regard. We will always keep random and unpredictable screening as part of our process. So just because somebody has gone through an expedited physical screening a number of times, we still may require them to go through regular screening at any time. So that's always something that we have in our control. There are other groups of people that we look at. I mentioned U.S. government employees with top secret security clearances. There are 16 agencies within the U.S. government who have employees with top secret security clearance, and so working with the Director of National Intelligence, signed an agreement with him last year to facilitate the expedited physical screening because, again, these are people who hold the nation's secrets, and we have to have confidence in them that they are known and trusted. So, again, that helps us at the checkpoint by not spending as much time with physical screening of them because, again, we know and trust them. There are other categories of people that we look at. Suffice to say, we are looking to expand that to people that may not be in the government or otherwise. And one of the most significant ways that we're doing that is we started a known and trusted traveler program called TSA PreCheck. TSA PreCheck is something that you either sign up for through the U.S. government, through a trusted traveler program, or we actually started off with U.S. carriers inviting in their most frequent flyers, those people flying, tens of thousands, 100,000 miles a year, and have done that for quite a while. Then they have been invited to participate in TSA PreCheck. And our goal last year was to be in 35 airports in the U.S. by the end of 2012. We made that goal, and now we're in 40 airports in the U.S. where there is a dedicated TSA PreCheck lane that people can go to, and they go through an expedited physical screening, such as keeping their shoes on, keeping their belt on, keeping a light jacket, keeping their liquids, aerosol gels, and a laptop computer in their carry-on bag. So those can all stay. And there's rarely more than a 2 or 3 minute wait at these dedicated lanes. So in these 40 airports, we actually have close to 60 of these lanes. Obviously, our large airports have multiple lanes. This past week, we just marked the 10 millionth passenger who has gone through TSA PreCheck. So it's a good start, but we're interested in expanding that even more broadly and actually have a goal of having 25% of all travelers in the U.S. go through some form of expedited physical screening by the end of this year. So we're working on that, and through a combination of additional people signing up for PreCheck and doing some other things that we can, we believe we have a good opportunity to make that goal. So that's some of the things that we're doing under risk-based security. The whole notion is that we are not trying to eliminate all risk associated with travel, but try to manage or to mitigate risk, to buy down that risk, if you will, to say we have a high confidence that you're not a terrorist, but let's make sure that we're doing everything we can to facilitate the free movement of people and goods with the best security. And so as we look at doing this domestically in the U.S., it brings me to my third and final point. It's fine to have a domestic program, whether here in the Kingdom or in the U.S. or wherever you are from, to treat your travelers, your passengers, in different ways if you can do that. But because we are a global economy and a global society, where so much of the business of each company represented here today and for each of us is internationally interlinked, we are working on ways to expand this whole notion of trusted traveler and risk-based security internationally. And there are a number of initiatives going on in that regard. One of the things that we did earlier just this month was to work out an agreement with international partners, including here in the Kingdom, to say that if U.S. passengers who go through TSA PreCheck would be allowed to fly to their international destination, because the standards that we have in the U.S. with TSA PreCheck, the pre-screening before they get to the airport, are commensurate with the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO standards. So that's one thing we're doing. We're also interested in reciprocity. So as countries develop their own known and trusted traveler programs and can differentiate between high risk, medium risk, and low risk passengers, we're interested in the details of that to facilitate that exchange, and eventually, we believe, to have some type of trusted traveler program in at least most countries that have major trade agreements with the U.S. And so again, we help promote the free movement of people and goods, but with the best security, given these risk-based security principles. A number of other things that we're doing. The one other that I'll mention, or I will mention in the U.S. that we're doing and may have some international implications, is what we call managed inclusion. That's simply taking passengers who are in a regular screening line or queue, and if they have if we know they're not on terrorist watch list, which of course we have in the U.S., and they have been past our behavior detection officers, which we have at all major airports, they're looking for suspicious behavior, not profiling, they're not looking for the person's appearance, but their behavior. And then third, if they've been past a bomb-sniffing canine, so they're not on a watch list, they're not demonstrating suspicious behavior, and they've been past a bomb-sniffing dog, then we are inviting them to go through a TSA pre-check expedited lane. We're piloting that right now in 4 airports, in Indianapolis, in Tampa, in Honolulu, and in Miami. So we hope to expand that. It is dependent in large respect upon more and more bomb-sniffing dogs, and we have over 800 of those, but there's a need for more, and so we look to expand that. And so as we again look internationally, we look for the opportunities to exchange best practices, to exchange ideas on how risk-based security can make sense. We've had a number of bilateral discussions around the world. We're having discussions, for example, with the European Union and as it relates to liquid aerosol gels, any number of opportunities. So I would just encourage those who have that interest to talk to us and to see what we may be able to do. So again, thank you for your time and attention this morning. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you, and I wish you much success in this conference. Thank you very much.
أشكر السيد بستول على كل هذه المعلومات القيمة، وأترك المجال الآن لطرح أي أسئلة. طيب الميكروفون لو سمحت. You can use the mic.
Hello. Yes, my name retired Major General Ibrahim Nader from Air Force. I just have a question. I like your concept. You talk about airspace security. But is there any contradictory between airspace security and airspace defense?
I apologize. You translated into Arabic, so I missed it.
لا الرجاء إعادة السؤال لأنه كان حاط السماعة.
I like very much your concept about airspace security, which is comprehensive concept. But my question is, there is any contradictory between airspace defense and airspace security? What you explain it for us here?
Thank you. So there's a number of aspects involved in risk-based security. The civil aviation is where we focus, of course, in terms of we screen approximately 630 million passengers in the U.S. every year, and that is our focus, how we can expedite their physical screening. But it is really the international aspects that are intriguing to us, because as we are focusing on whether you want to call it one-stop security, where people who are transiting, and for example with the Kingdom here, with the number of transit passengers increasing significantly, and with the mega project that's ongoing to be completed in 2015, I believe, the number of transit passengers here in the Kingdom will go up significantly. So the question is, do we have confidence in other countries' screening protocols to facilitate one-stop security? And that's something I think is exciting for those in the security and clearly the business community, because, for example, in the U.S., the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and all the major business entities have strongly endorsed what we are doing with risk-based security. Is actually the one thing that our Congress, which is divided on so many things, actually there's strong bipartisan support for risk-based security. Not everybody agrees with every aspect of the 14 changes we've made, but that whole notion of how can we do that from that perspective. So thank you for your comments.
أي سؤال آخر أخوان؟
Thank you, Mr. Piston. I have a question regarding the your definition of airport security. As you know, cyber today is #1 threat and not terrorism. And where security, cyber security comes in your planning in the airport security and definition. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a very important topic that we are focused on, both with the airport and the, for example, air traffic control, but also the aircraft manufacturers and the avionics on board. So our concern is that whether it's a terrorist or a transnational criminal group or just a hacker might be able to do something bad on one or more aircraft through the avionics or through however they would access through malicious code or with the air traffic control system in the U.S. So there's a next generation air traffic control program underway, but we work with the rest of the U.S. intelligence and law enforcement community to address what the intelligence is saying about terrorists, and fortunately, thus far, there is not the level of sophistication from terrorists that there are from other groups and states, obviously, which is a good thing. The challenge is, though, as they are able to acquire those skills, then how are our multiple layers of security, particularly as it relates to cyber, how are they positioned? Because with risk-based security and cyber, we want to make sure we don't have a single point of failure. So there need to be redundancies and additional layers that are in place to address those challenges.